Hello team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. And certainly at the beginning here, it depends how long this goes on as to whether I add things on afterwards, but I'm really excited to have a guest on who is Deniele from tney. Now, you saw me, if you've checked out my output for last week, I was on tney, and then they kindly let me mirror that content, or at least I put part of that entire video on my own channel. They are really interested in reporting the war from an accurate, objective point of view, not necessarily morally objective, but in terms of data and information to get around the issues of inaccuracy, of misinformation, so on and so forth. So Deniele is going to come and speak to us today a little bit about barrels. But first of all, thanks so much, mate, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to come here and discuss with you. And in tney, we are very much committed on doing our best to produce unbiased and trustworthy news about the entire spectrum, and of course, concentrated on the war undergoing in Ukraine. So for us, it's paramount to try to have always documents and information that are double checked. And in my case, in the last few weeks, I started to publish long trend respect to what I normally do. But these have been the work not only of myself, but also of the entire team. Of course, different areas have different person involved, but in the more specifically on the FPV drone, I worked alongside, and I'm still work alongside Andrew Perpetua, which is an associate, but also I normally try to have feedback from the entire team. And for this thread about the gun barrel, I worked with CJ and John and Jonathan. Yep.
Yeah, so that's John Ridge at CJ as well, who both of those contribute to Andrew Perpetua's live streams, and Jonathan, who is one of the main guys behind tney. So that's who all they are. So this is the thread that you're talking about. Which did you want me to show it while you're talking or not?
Yeah, there is no way. Honestly, I'm very, very happy because when I did the one on FPV, I've done. I didn't talk at the time. I was not talking with Daniel R by any means, but I was looking at his material and I say, okay, this is, I think, the good time to work on the data of Andrew and try to make a good thread that shows some numbers, because a lot of people are guessing, and I would like to see if there is a trend, if there is something. I went on that topic really without any expectation of finding one side in advance respect to the other. I was completely unbiased. I just wrote a code to analyze Andrew's data, and then I just take the results as they were. And this other one is on a completely different topic, so, and not very much discussed in the last few months, also because due to the shell issue, the lack of shell, there were a lot of discussion about barrel a few months ago, but now essentially this went under the carpet. So I didn't expect to have so much attention, honestly. Instead, it was probably interesting.
And this is just a little interjection from myself after the recording. Apologies for the popping on Daniele's mic. It is something that we tried to sort out but couldn't. But I think next time we speak, that'll be sorted. But there is the popping. Once you do get used to it and kind of ignore it, but it might be a little bit hard on the ears to begin with. Barrels are, of course, incredibly important, because without barrels, you can't, maintain howitzers that are, artillery is the god of the war. So there's been a lot of attention, as you rightly say, on artillery ammunition, but also a lot of desire to try and work out how many barrels Russia has in all those fields of artillery that are in the back ends of the Russian Federation, but also the concerns that actually barrels take a long time to manufacture. So if you can't cannibalize them off other pieces of artillery, you have to manufacture them, and when they get worn out, how many barrels do the Ukrainians have access to? They can't really cannibalize the artillery pieces like the Russians can. So it's about Western manufacturers being able to produce them, but of course that takes time. But anyway, that's just my intro into the subject.
No, your intro is very well on spot. And one signal that Russian has been in a dramatic problem regarding barrel. I mean, I say dramatic because there is a reason why. A lot of people in the last summer, I think, probably October, I still don't have. With this war, I start to lose a grasp of time. But there was a moment, probably in spring, where we saw the T-54, T-55 being dragged out from the store and deployed. And a lot of people were essentially laughing at these and saying, "Oh, look, this tank will have no real effect on the battlefield. They are very old. There is no real benefit in using them." But several analysts, one was Ryan Macbeth and myself, but just thinking about this, said, well, maybe they are not going to work as a first line main battle tank, because in that case they of course can be beaten by any weapon on the field, but they may be used with their 100mm gun as indirect fire. Of course, it's very imprecise, but they have drones, and drones can direct an artillery, already an artillery piece, but also a tank doing that activity. And ammunition is not a very much a problem because Iran is producing 100mm, so and they are already in the process of acquiring ammunition and suicide drone. So the use of T-55, T-54 is completely a signal that they are lacking, at the very least, light guns. But also other OSINT account started to scramble their essentially their depots in Russia, and they start to see that there were an increasing number of self-propelled but also towed artillery being moved out, but also moved and left parked in a very chaotic way. One of our member, Jay, is currently following these, and we noticed that essentially many times towed artillery are left into this depot, and it's likely because they have been used as part source, including their barrel. And this, for example, also the Masta has been the gun of the Masta is present also in a version which is towed, and now you don't see anymore. And we were discussing just yesterday with Andrew about this, and he suggests that these have been used to replace those that were essentially out of life for the SPH version. So, as you say, there is an increasing problem because the more you fire, the more likely at some point is you have to change the barrel. And this, of course, is a problem also for Ukraine. Is an obvious problem. However, there are some benefit of having a large alliance like NATO behind, because, of course, we can procure, we have stocks of barrels, and we can produce them. Of course, it takes time, but it's not that long. The problem is restart the production. That's what is the real problem at the moment.
Yeah, and people like Covert Cabal have been counting up over the course of the war, how many artillery pieces and how many tanks exist in these depots around Russia, to try and work out how long they can keep going on replacing damaged or destroyed pieces of kit, or how many cannibalized bits of equipment can they bring to the front line to help repair, say, the barrels of existing self-propelled howitzers? The issue for the Russians is that they have been firing, some claim as much as 60,000 shells a day, somewhere between 40 and 60,000 shells. They're now presently firing about 10,000 shells a day to Ukrainians 2,000. So, even though Ukraine will have the same problems, Russia will have those problems times 5, say, for example, at the moment, assuming that their maintenance schedules are the same. And you could argue that Ukraine are better at maintaining it. I don't know if that's true, but the Russians are firing an awful lot of rounds out of the barrels that already were old when they brought them to the war. Unlike, say, some of the Panzer Howitzer 2000s and some of these other guns that hadn't been used so much, the Russians may well have had older pieces that were being used more and arguably not being maintained as much. They were becoming more inaccurate as they were being fired more, and then the barrels are bursting. And so there's this great need for the Russians to get their hands on lots of barrels.
Yeah, no, yeah, we don't know exactly how well are maintained, but for sure, for example, M777, for a certain amount of time, they were shipped back to Poland to be refurbished. So if these continue, and there is also reason for why you would prefer to have this activity to take place in countries which are essentially away from the front line, is just also to avoid this gun to be targeted, despite at the moment the success in doing this has been quite low, because these information are very well maintained. But you are touching an exposed nerve here, because one of the problem of Russia and I think of this entire military operation is the fact that Russia has, of course, more of everything, but the numbers sometimes goes against you rather than helping you, because when you want to field a very numerous army, you need to support your soldier, you need to support every aspect of your soldier, from the simple need of food, from ammunition, but also medicine and other commodities that are needed to be in to a certain level of combat effectiveness. Now, the problem that the Russians are experiencing is that because they have a large number, but they have an army that is not very well maintained in terms of logistic, they are struggling with that. And when you struggle with that, your potential is essentially much lesser. The Ukrainian, on the other side, because they are fighting closer to their supply line, they can, of course, have better quality of the supply. Of course, these have a risk, and this is also why you see, Andrew, Perpetua, they nearly daily update on what has been destroyed recently, and it's a couple of weeks that trucks, Ural, Loaf are always hit by Ukrainian. This is due to two different aspects. The first one is that the military operation is, of course, slowing down in most of the front line, so they are less active, because when VDV attacked Krinky, we had essentially every day 5, 6, 7 BTR destroyed, and this means that, of course, there is something occurring, and it's the same when Ukrainian do. I mean, is always is dual these things. But what is staggering is that during the start of the counteroffensive, if you look at the data on the database, you can see that Ukrainians were hitting at the beginning artillery, radar, anti-air facilities, so everything that was helping the defense of the front line. Now they are hitting the logistic, which is a completely reasonable things to do, because once you undermine the capability of bringing stuff to the front line, you will attire your enemy. And this is what is going to happen. And yes, these are some of the images that I saw as well. And the Cover Cabal did a magnificent job in categorizing all these depot. And regarding the manufacturing, now there are a lot of speculation and on this, but one thing is obvious, is that now Russia is not able to buy new machine from Europe, and Europe is nearly probably the world leader in accurate and efficient machine for rotary forging, because this is how barrel at the moment are done. Of course, there is China, and I'm sure they are going to procure new equipment from China. There is no reason why they shouldn't do this. And I don't think China will impede any activity in that sector. But this will take time, because you need to set up a facility, you need to train people, and then you have to start the production and verify that all the manufacturing process follow the specs that you need. So this takes time. Does Russia have this time? I doubt.
Yeah, I mean that's the question. You know, who has the advantage in all of these different areas? How much time and effort? How much money? How much does Russia have access to components to be able to support their war effort? And this is essentially, you know, as many people have said, wars are about how deep your pockets are, which in effect is how big your manufacturing capacity is. And as you've already mentioned, how much can allied nations support Ukraine in their efforts to keep artillery pieces in the field, and also to provide more of them, against what can Russia do? And this is why I say Russia, in my opinion, can't win this war when you look at their relative GDP compared to all the allied nations together. But they can prevail if and only if China get involved on it in a really big way. You know, they do have access to Iranian weaponry, and they are getting stuff from North Korea, which is not helping Ukraine, obviously. But I don't know how sustainable that is. Anyway, that's the overall kind of picture as far as I'm concerned.
No, I think is a very realistic picture. And another point very important is that when we compare GDP, we are not comparing nations that are effectively at war each other, because Europe alone, of course, can outpace Russia, but only if there is a political effective will to do so. And this is what concern me, but also I think the entire weapon industry, defense industry, because many people say, oh well, there is a lot of of lobbying, there is a lot of willing to have a gain over the war, but this war should have taught us that this is completely untrue, because the model of especially European defense company is a very different model from what was or what it is in US, for example, where the state has some control over manufacturing, for example, of ammunition. The Scranton plant is of US Army, but is given to General Dynamics as contractor to operate it. But for example, UK directly give to a private industry the contract to produce the ammunition.
Yeah, I was listening to Patrick Bury talk about this recently, or Bury, who was talking about how it almost seems counterintuitive, because we understand that private companies and corporations are much more dynamic than state enterprises, and they can react and do all this, and you know, and that's the beauty of the private sector. But actually, when it comes to ammunition production in the States, they are ahead of the EU, precisely because their main artillery ammunition manufacturing plants are state owned, and because they're state owned, they don't necessarily have to go, well, we need to make sure we've got a 5-year contract in place, and we've got to have all this capital in, and we're only going to build this if we can justify it with the capital outlay. You know, if you kind of own all that, you say, right, just it doesn't really matter how much it costs and whether we've got a long-term sustainability to this production. We need to produce them now, so go and build me as many as you can. Whereas in the EU, as far as I understand it, European manufacturers are like, well, until we get the orders in, and until those orders are over, say, like a 5-year period where we can justify ramping up production and getting capital outlay, you know, getting literal bits of machinery into these plants and rejuvenating old lines, like, we aren't going to build this for you. So interestingly, it has helped in the US to have the manufacturing plants being state owned. That's how I understood it.
No, I totally agree, and I honestly learn a lot from this because I was believing that the model, the European model, was maybe better, but then after seeing this also from the other side, I immediately understood that is not. I mean, has its own benefit. Don't take me wrong,
Yeah.
but the problem of doing this is that you need a political will. So, for example, Sunak should say to BAE, "I gave you 1 billion to produce that amount of ammo. Do this." The problem is that this political will means a financial commitment of the government. Now, the the difference is that when you own the plant, probably this cost may be a bit less, and also in terms of budget, you can somehow squeeze the budget and move some arrangement to make things happen. Or there is already budget allocated to defense, so the defense have just to redirect this. At this moment, I don't know exactly in the US how it works, but for BAE, we know how it works. The government have to give a contract, and this contract have to be approved. And so this essentially comes from a political decision which need to be supported, need to be financed. So, it's an
And you're right.
extra.
You're actually right, because for BAE Systems, they also have to make sure that they are making a profit. So within that
Exactly. That's the
has to
point.
be, well, we're not going to do that for that price. We need to. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be more
Well,
expensive.
now I don't want to be too on this side, because the main problem for industry, as now apart BAE, is the fact that the plant have at the very least don't lose money, because
Yeah.
the BAE has a huge market, mostly for UK, but also US and abroad, and they sometime may lose money on some activities, but this loss will introduce them to other activities, because MOD can say, "Oh, you do this for me. You lose a bit here, but then I give you this other contract." And this is completely normal. It's not something illegal. It's an investment. You invest in an area because you know that you step in. And of course, 155 will be a very strong market for in the next few years, even if the war finished today. But the problem is that they have to go to the investor and say, "Oh, well, we are going to buy enough steel to produce a 3 million round in 3 years." And they need to provide an evidence that this will produce at the very least no loss. And without a proper government help, unfortunately, these things cannot be done. And this is, I think, a stark reality of understanding that some industries, unfortunately, cannot fully private, because some industries in some, like health, in some cases you're going to lose money, but then how much you value the life of a person if you need to do a particular treatment, how much you value the liberty of your country if you have to invest in defense. So these are very debatable question. How do things we need to debate on this, as we always do. But I start to see that must be some areas where state at least have to be more involved rather than less, even if you lose a bit of money. Because in the grand scheme of things, this invasion of Russia has cost us and all the world much more in terms of GDP, rather than if we invested a little bit more in defense and try to deter this. Because the deterrence is always cheaper than fighting a war.
Yeah, so I was talking previously about how my favorite analogy for spending on defense is insurance. Nobody likes, I don't like, I've got a car, I drive around. I'm legally obliged to have insurance. I don't like having insurance. If I chose not to have insurance, then when it comes to me crashing, I'd be in loads of trouble. I'd be absolutely screwed. So I pay out every year just in case I do need to draw on that insurance, just in case there is that car crash. And the better insurance coverage that I pay for, the better I will be sorted out when I do have a car crash. And defense is exactly like that. So the more money you spend on your defense insurance each year, the better coverage you'll have when you need to draw on it, which is the car crash of the Ukraine war. And we have been underspending for too long, and that means that when it's come to the Ukraine war, it turns out that our policy has a really high excess that we have to pay, and we haven't got such good coverage, so we're having to pay extra. Do you know what I mean? So I think that for me, that's a really useful analogy, I find.
No, I think is perfect because in the end, the capability of deter for an aggression comes to that is an insurance for the future generation to be kind safe, because we need to understand. I mean, I don't like war. I like weapon. I like as a system. I like gun as system because are very. I love engineering, as you can imagine from my avatar. But the problem is that I mean, one of the most powerful phrase of Zelensky was democracy have to be better harmed than tyranny, and I think this is very powerful, and has all the meaning of this, because if a tyrant have more military capability than a neighbor country, and no one in terms of diplomacy and politics can do anything because UN has been completely useless. I'm not advocating to dismantle UN; it's just to be reformed. That's for sure. But the UN has its own benefit. But the problem is that at some point you may arrive to the point that you need to use weapon. You need to become kinetic, and if you then go to the test without enough ammunition, enough means, is like asking to our NHS to confront the pandemic without proper PPE. So this is just to give you an example of something that I experienced in the past. So something similar. We had to provide to our NHS worker for PPE because there was not enough investment, despite the alarm from our scientists that there was something that could come. Sorry for digressing on COVID, but this is exactly what is happening. It's a global, a very global phenomenon that is affecting life of everyone. And for example, in terms of shell production, weapon production, steel and any other raw material will increase in price and will have an impact of economy because everyone now are moving to production. And it's exactly like COVID. Everyone start to produce a respirator. Everyone start to produce or buy from China masks, and prices went crazy. And the lack of raw material uh, created a lot of delays. And the same problem we are looking at today. Russia has the same, but also Russia has some allies, as Ukraine for luckily has. So we need to be careful.
So, what is the situation then with regard to barrels, which
Yeah.
is the main thing that you've been researching?
Yes. So to go more on the point, as I told you previously, this article came out because there was a lot of naive, but also I think oriented propaganda to say that Western equipment essentially was a kind of luxurious boutique over-engineered thing, which could not face a real war situation. This is completely false. And the reason is because people who tends to put discredit on our capabilities is trying to sell the idea that we are overspending because and we are investing in weapon in order to make other companies rich. And for example, another example in this area is the F-35. A lot of people without even the knowledge said a lot of very meaningless things about the F-35, but no one spent, I mean, a lot of people spend time to explain, but in the era of social media, it's much easier to spread a lie which is impactful and looks reasonable rather than, explaining and going through the details of a problem. In the particular, yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, as evidence suggests, falsehoods spread 6 times faster than truths on social media. So unfortunately, that is the case. I mean, when I was I was doing some research into Panzerhauser 2000s some time ago, and there was talk about that could be aligned to what you're saying there. The talk about how they were needing to have their barrels maintained a lot more because they were just firing so many rounds a day. When the Ukrainians first got them, they were just hammering these barrels, and it was kind of this idea that perhaps the Western equipment like these Panzerhauser 2000s that cost a lot of money and are supposedly a lot better, but actually they're not as robust because they were needing to be maintained. But I think it's just like, no, they are robust. They're just being fired an absolute hell of a lot each day, and at some point that something's got to give.
Yes, and in all honesty, the gun of the gun should be is from Rheinmetall and is one of the best in its sector. Is an L5059, so is well renowned as a good gun. Now, in the thread that I wrote, I tried to discuss first of all which are the main effect that limit and consume, because we are literally consuming metal when we operate an artillery piece, but even a tank, whatever is shooting. But in the particular case of gun barrel, the pressure and the temperature and also the chemistry of the propellant plays a crucial role in the life and in the capability of a barrel to sustain a certain number of firing mission. Now, the thread goes very systematically across different aspects. For example, one thing that I wanted to cover at the time was the effect for fatigue and erosion. Now, I'm not going to the detail again because maybe too long, but essentially you have to think about this, that when a barrel is fired, the projectile itself have to go across the barrel, and when this happens, of course, there is a contact between the projectile and the barrel, which has this rifling, the rifling that impress to the projectile as a rotary motion in order to stabilize it. Because remember, differently from tanks, artillery pieces has rifled gun because they need to be spin stabilized. Instead, most of the tank, except the British one, they have smooth bore guns because the projectile that they fire once out from the barrels, essentially it's open up and you have fins, so it's a fin stabilizer. So as fast as it goes, the fins provide aerodynamic stabilization. For the artillery pieces, in most of the case, this is not the case. The projectile goes with a ballistic trajectory and need to be stabilized around its axis of symmetry, which is across the center, if you think. Now, to cut it short, sorry, because I like discussing these things and then I start to enter into the details, but essentially the barrel are eroded but also fatigued. So slowly in time, you have a process of removal of the material. And in order to prevent these, normally we apply, very nice picture, a coating that you may see sometime if you shine a UV light. So you can see that across the thickness there is a few micron of coating, which is normally done in chromium. And these allow the barrel to last very long because this coating allows the steel underneath to don't be affected by the corrosion, the chemical corrosion that occur. Because remember, when you fire the propellant, the gases that push the propellant, the projectile forward are very high temperature and also very corrosive. This is one of the reasons because when we developed big cannon, we start to introduce system in order to avoid gases to go back because inside the compartment, because these are very toxic and corrosive. So in this process, if repeated many times, even along a long time, this will produce slowly the introduction of fracture, microfracture, and these will evolve in time. So the industry, what it does is trying to give an estimate on how many shot you can do. And here comes the problem of many people that many people miss. Essentially, you never fire. It's very often you have a fire mission, and the fire mission tells you that you have to land around somewhere on a map. So you have very complex algorithms or computers that do the calculation for you, or you have to do by hand. And this will give you a certain amount of parameters that you have to satisfy in order to complete that mission. And so this will mean that you have to put a certain amount of propellant in order to push your round at enough speed with enough angle to reach accurately that point. Now, in my thread, I just put out a table which is freely available to everyone. It's from the 2016 unclassified artillery book of US Army, a list of all the charges that today you can use. You have to scroll down. I think is you will see it's a big table. Is through the end. Yeah. After this, yes, that one. The table is just there, and you can see that there are different type of charge. Now, you may even recognize now on the left you have the max, which are essentially charge that comes like small. I mean, I are not small, but essentially like pre-packed one, and the other one is a bug. These were used previously. So previously we tend to use bugs, but now we moved on another format, which of course improved the propellant quality and and other chemical that are inside the propellant. For example, do you remember when you look at 155 shell, you see a bronze, a copper liner around the back of the shell, and that part of copper tends to be spreaded along the barrel while you fire many times. So inside these, yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to say, is that where was I? So basically, are you talking about the band, this driving band that gets squashed into the rifling? So that's a softer metal than the rifling, and that's in a band around the artillery round that then gets squashed into the rifling, that then forces it to spin in the way the rifling is designed, so that gives you stabilization and perhaps even further range as well compared to fin stabilized. So if you have what's called smooth bore, where this is smooth instead of rifled, then you need something to stop the shell from wobbling about in the air. So then you have to, as soon as it fires out, it can flick out or whatever, or it has fins behind it, so that those fins stop the projectile wobbling.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, and then just one note: the copper band that you have on the back is also used to seal the gun, because you want to avoid anything to go ahead. So you want to hold the pressure all behind you.
Yes. So the interesting, right? So we go back to this. So interesting, as far as I understand it, the problem with some of the North Korean ammunitions is that they rounds is that there's a slight deviation. They're not so accurately produced, and actually that leaves a gap between the shell and the barrel, which allows some of that gas to come backwards and then can cause an explosion inside the barrel. Is that right?
Well, I saw a lot of picture about different shell produced in North Korea, and this morning I even posted, I even retweeted with the real interest something about this, because they looks like being angle grinded. But yes, the production quality, this is a classical failure that could occur. This is an Abrams, but it's very much the same situation, where you have this opening like a flower of the barrel, and you would like to avoid this as much as possible. And so these occur when these occur so ahead, because the pressure in that location is very much lower than closer to the breach where the explosion occur. This means that that fracture probably occur because there was already a damage, the barrel was probably overused, and then at some point it just blew up. There are other cases I show in this thread where the explosion happen much closer to the breach, and in those cases it's likely to be a problem with the charge. And this happened also in Ukraine on a crab, and a crab had a failure like that. And these failure could occur, are completely normal, I mean, in the grand scheme of the number, but we saw objectively more problem on the Russian side rather than the Ukrainian one. And the reason is because the artillery pieces that we are giving come with ammunition and propellant charge that allow the machines, these machines, to work for more than the declared life. So normally a barrel should last 2,500 EFC. Now EFC is effective, is like an effective charge. So essentially is a number that people who operate the gun use to understand how many shots are left. But because there are different type of ammunition that need to be fired with with different charges, it starts to become complex. So the table that I posted essentially tells you for each type of charge how much life every time you use one of these has been removed. And if you use, for example, a 4H, which is a very high charge, you have a reduction of 0.5. So if you have 2,500, you can exactly look how many round roughly you can fire. But this is of course a safe limit. You can surely go over this by checking the gun if you really need.
So is there anything on that thread that you need me to show people with regard to that?
Yes, it's always the table that I is at the end.
Is that table there? Or
yes, that table contains a lot of information.
Fatigue life, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, if you have if you fire a 4H, which is the M232, which is the most used, you consume 0.5 in terms of equivalent erosion effect. Okay, the total life allows you to consume 2,500. So
Right.
this means that you have, if you do 2,500 divided 0.5, you obtain 5,000. So this means that roughly you end the program life of your barrel after 5,000 round. Now there is a very important but. Often you don't use only the 4H, you may use the 2L or the 1L, because the 4H is one of the most used. But sometimes you use, because you need to fire a shorter range, you use those, which are much lower. For example, for the M231, the 2L, you have that the erosion effect is just 0.05, so 10 times less. So probably if you fire only those, you should use the fatigue one, which is 0.15, and so on. So by doing very simple addition and multiplication or division, you can roughly estimate how much EFC, which is this representative number of the life of your barrel, left before you need to change or respect. Now, in the paper, in this thread, I didn't extensively discuss the maintenance, because of course gun crew have to do this.
So just to get that right, if you fire a round further and you need bigger charge, then that means you can fire fewer of those. If you were just going to only fire 40-kilometer rounds with bigger charges and whatnot, then you will only be able to fire a fraction of what you'd otherwise be able to fire. So 2,500 is if you're firing sort of average rounds all the time. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Not exactly. So 2,500 EFC is the maximum number that you can reach. For example, on this table, you can see that you have the full charge is 7, the 7R, and on different barrel may produce different effect. So for example, if you are firing a hold M105, which is the top row,
right,
have,
so these will actually, so 0.5 is like half of 2,000, so that'd only be 1,250. Is that what you're saying?
You can fire like,
So there's nothing that I was going the wrong way with that. So the M231 are actually, you don't want to fire many of them.
No, you have to divide that number. You have to divide the 2,500 for that number to obtain the total amount of round that you can fire. But you can see that this is insanely big.
Yeah. So I was right then. So yeah, that was right originally. So you could, in principle, fire loads more of these ones. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And of course, but this of course depends on what are your needs. And you can imagine that at the beginning, they probably need to use much bigger charge because they have to fire much further. And so the poor PH 2000, they were fire along the day, all the day, to very, very big charges. And so this means that they had the hell from them. So what you said at the beginning is very much what happened. Also because we have to remember that those machines were sent when Ukraine was still in very harsh situation. So it's very likely that they used them as much as they could.
right. And so where does that leave us with understanding, where Ukraine are at in terms of their barrels and their needs? What have they generally been firing throughout the course of the war? Have they been overdoing it? Have they been firing artillery rounds in general that require more maintenance or less maintenance? What have you found out?
Okay, so these come from a direct discussion with CJ, and I asked him which is the more likely fire mission, and he told me that in general reports tell us that there are guns that fired 11,000 round without a flow, so it's very good. Considering that these
Considering
were
that's gone from 2,500,
exactly.
that's over 4 times.
Yeah,
Wow.
at the maximum capacity, of course, 2,500 at the maximum capacity. So it's very likely that they fired a lot of 4H, 2L, 1L, because it depends. It depends on the ammunition that you are firing. For example, the Excalibur round, rocket-assisted round are those that arrive further, but they need a big push because they are much heavier. They need a certain initial speed much higher than normal round in order to work properly. So those normally are used with the more intense and more demanding charges. But the others, a 4H, 3H, 2L, 1L, are those that are used mostly. And in the range, probably a 2L or 3H are the most used. In this thread, for example, I did an example of firing 100 4H and then 53H. So you can see that you have 100 round, you multiply it for 0.5, then you have a 50, you multiply for 0.2, and you do the sum. So this means that in total, you didn't fire 150, you fired 60. Because the example is written just in the text. So in this way, you can estimate the how much life you consumed on the barrel. And these numbers, of course, are completely following not assumption, but just a table that is published and is essentially the M667, 666 is the barrel of the M777, by the way. So it's very accurate and can give us an overview of what could be a typical consumption. And these numbers are reasonable. Now, many people say, oh, in the past, this was better. And this is false, because if you go for the best performing howitzer of the Second World War, which was the Long Tom, it could fire around 1,500 shell, which is not barely comparable to what we have. In addition, even if you fire with the maximum round, which is never happened all the time, you have to understand that a Long Tom operated in an environment where drone were not a thing, where you can entrench yourself, stay there for a week and fire on the German without even thinking about being attacked. Nowadays, artillery need to be mobile, need to be transportable. So this comparison with the past must end, because each weapon has been developed and utilized in the environment for which it was created. We can't just say, oh, was better before because the crude numbers are better. This is a very big fallacy of people who naively or on purpose want to spread disinformation.
So, what do you do with the information that you've gathered? What are your conclusions?
Now, the conclusion is that the barrels that we provided are very good, are performing well, but the problem is always the same. We need to provide more, and production, unfortunately, of M777 barrel is, I think, suspended because the contract was ended a few years ago.
Really? What? Because the M777 is coming, is at the end of its life, or
No. I mean, sorry, the production of the system is finished. I think the barrel that have been sent are those that were in the store and in the stock.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. As in, like, they're not producing them still, M777s for. They're not being newly produced. Is that correct? I mean, I don't know about the M777.
At the moment, no.
No, because I mean, the idea was originally, as far as I understood it, they'd start replacing towed howitzers with self-propelled howitzers and things like HIMARS, although they do still need them for things like, you know, elite paratroopers. Drop them because you can actually put them in the back of a Hercules or similar plane, and you can drop them with parachutes and whatnot. So they still have their place. But the idea was, yeah, replace them with SPHs and HIMARS, and yeah, you're going to spend a lot more on this, but they're going to be far more accurate, and so on and so forth. But actually, the idea, looking at this war, is that perhaps there is still a place for large-scale usage of artillery, and there's a question mark over what to do with that. But what are the manufacturing times for barrels? Because I was told that actually they take a hell of a time to actually just simply build them.
Yes, okay. I want to just to follow up on something that you said.
Sorry.
The towed howitzer for a brief time during the spread of Caesar, of Archer, and many others, SPH were like, oh, doomed. Everyone were saying, oh, towed is not good anymore. It's better to put on track. But the problem that people always forget is that when you have to build a system, you have to build each part. And the easier a system is to produce, like a towed howitzer, the easier is, and the faster you can produce, and the probably also cheaper it is. But for the cheap, there is a big problem that we may discuss later. So, and also the needs of different branches may be different. So many people, including in Tocni at the beginning, were convinced that towed howitzer would not be a thing anymore. But the more this conflict carry on, and the more looks like that they will be with us, and there will be still a place for them, because in the end, a good trained crew can open a mount and dismount a towed howitzer in very quickly. So is only a matter of providing the proper tool for towing, which really matter. And this is also probably a reason why Germany is assisting a lot in providing trucks, a lot of trucks, which I think is a very smart thing to do, because at this point in the war, we need to build up every aspect of Ukrainian army, from the logistic, military training for its infantry, tanks, and ammunition. So these have to be the year where we build up for 2025, in my opinion. Regarding the production of the barrel, now very much it depends on the availability of. So it can take few days, but the real problem is that the machining of all the other parts and the integration. So when you when you produce anything in industry which is made by different parts, you never produce a system at a time. You have like different area of your factory works on different product in order to then integrate them together. And this is the same for artillery. The main problem is having more lines, which means more people, investment if you want to do this with robots, in order to do on a faster pace. Because if you produce howitzer and ammunition as you are in peacetime, you will never end. You will never finish those in time. I can't give you the proper numbers, but I can tell you if we don't change the way, it will be too long.
So, is this to say that there are presently challenges in barrel procurement for Ukraine? Like, who do you think, whether intuitively but hopefully more evidence based, who do you think is in a better position to be able to maintain the barrels they've got and the barrels they will get, the Ukrainians or the Russians?
Oh no. I think we have very good capabilities because now Rheinmetall and BAE are I think the two main producer, at least at very least in Europe. Don't forget that BAE, which is a UK business, operates a lot in US. So US is also interested in having capabilities to coming back, because everything that is happening in Ukraine is changing the way on how we will fight war in the next few years, probably decades. So there is investment, there is research even on the changing process. For example, from what I can tell you is that there is a genuine interest in making the process faster, not only for a problem about Ukraine, but also because there are advantages, for example, to do this process with other techniques, which allows you to produce faster and produce a barrel which lasts longer. So, for example, trying to work out barrels with the cold process rather than traditional hot forming or hot rotary forging.
So, sorry, I was just looking at the M777 and whether, because the question is, what I did hear something about what the US are going to be doing with, it might have been from Perun actually, about what the US are going to be doing with regard to towed howitzers and howitzers in general and what they're doing with their artillery. But you're absolutely right. The US is looking at everything that's happening in this war and learning from it, as all the nations of the world are. You'll be having China looking at this and seeing how this will affect the strategy, their own military strategy. The British Army, I mean, goodness me, we're just sort of rewriting our military strategy on a hoof at the moment, I think. And lots of, when it comes to drones, for example, the UK has been involved in this big long procurement process for this massive Reaper style drone that's going to cost, I don't know, 6 million a pop or whatever it is. And then it turns out that actually Ukraine shows that we need thousands of tiny drones. And it's like, well, we just spent all these years pumping this money into this project that appears to be completely obsolete, judging on what's taking place in Ukraine. So Ukraine is teaching us all so much about what we need and about the future of warfare.
Yes, and I mean we need. I mean, we need always to be fair with Ukraine, because Ukraine is learning directly on the field, which is always pretty much effective and efficient. Because when I don't shy about the fact that I normally do some fundraise, I speak with soldiers, I try to help them the little I can, and always that some of them have been in the UK Army, in the US Army, and they are learning there as well. Because in the moment that you are facing difficulties and there is not much other help that can come, because I mean, once you have IMARS, once you have M777, you just need the ammunition and probably more of that. But the technology that they are currently having at their disposal is honestly nearly the best that we can offer. Of course, we are retaining probably the best asset, and I'm very hungry about that. For example, airplane. We are there is a lot of electronic warfare and telecommunication. Ireland would talk with you hours about this. We always rant about they need encryption, they need more communication, command and control equipment, which are not kinetic things, but are things that change the way on how you operate. And I think I already told you one thing that I noticed is that if you compare how they were using Bradley at the beginning, the 47th, at the beginning, and after 3 months. After 3 months, they looks even better than the US Army in some scenes.
Really, I mean, we've been seeing them get used up in Stepover near Avdiivka, and they seem to be using really effectively in sort of strafing down these buildings and then supporting their troops in a particular way, rather than just being sent across minefields and then, you know, there was adaptation and learning.
Yeah, and the same is for us. Because, for example, the drone example that you made, I'm sure that 99% that the intention were good, but the problem is that then when you face the reality of the combat, then you realize, okay, one may be very good, but then look at what happened on the battlefield. The battlefield demonstrates you that cheap drone can defeat very costly vehicles. Now, it's true that electronic warfare is not even at the scale that should be on both sides, because Russia is struggling as well, despite its leadership in the sector. But still, a $300-400 drone destroying a tank or incapacitating it.
Yeah, and going back to your previous point, it seems that the US, from what I understand, is like one of the leaders in electronic warfare in the world, as in they've got that knowledge, but they aren't giving that to Ukraine, and same with most nations, because that is the intellectual property that is the most sensitive, and if you lose a bit of that equipment, then it might have far more effect than if you lose, say, a Bradley tank, a Bradley infantry fighting vehicle to the other side. So, you know, you can give a slightly outdated Abrams tank or a slightly outdated Bradley with good kit on, but stuff that if you lose, it's not gonna be intellectually like a big issue. But it's the electronic warfare stuff that the West won't give. But that's the stuff, annoyingly, that Ukraine most need.
Yes, especially now, because we are not going to see very large movement. But what would help, for example, the videos about the Dnipro River. I start to watch them. I didn't finish. I'm going to prepare an analysis on that. But it's very sad because you see boats that normally brings back people who have injuries or wounded, ammunition supply, and you see these boats completely vulnerable to these drones, which use cheap and dual purpose at the most cameras. So nothing that me and you with some knowledge and money can build in our garage. But the problem is that there is no electronic warfare that can help Ukraine, for example, to deter at least that area. And this is sad because the work that they are doing on the left bank of the Dnieper is incredible, and they demonstrated that if they are given enough coverage, for example, the 3 Russian bomber destroyed were an example on how they were able to put these threat down and reduce the amount of gliding bomb raining on them day and night. When I saw Andrew's map in the last months, it was terrible. You can see how many they used, but then was solved. I mean, partial.
I mean, that was with one presumes a Patriot missile system. But the point is, I mean, it's as if that you could say to Ukraine, look, here's a really good bit of electronic warfare capability that we're going to give you. Don't take it across the river. Only use it in the Kherson area near Krinky on the right bank of the river, on the Ukrainian side of the river, to protect those boats. You just have this kind of little bubble of safety around there. That would just be fantastic. I don't think that's doable at all. But you're right. You know, as Andrew's showing with his stats, those boats are vulnerable and they are getting blown up at quite a rate at the moment.
Yeah, and also I think if this is not going to be stopped, this could be a problem because honestly, I know that those part of or all of those Marines were trained in UK and Norway, but I really, I really shy off of their valor because I don't know how they are sustaining all of that, and I hope that something will be done in order to protect them and at least allow them supplies to flow in and flow out because it's very important for them, especially because the Russians were not able to dislodge them. So I think worth the try, but this is above our possibility. Apart discussing this, we don't have much power on that, unfortunately.
So, just to finish up, what would be your then conclusions about what you found out with your research into particularly barrels and other things? I know you might have already said it, but just to kind of re-summarize, if you like.
Well, the fact is that first of all, the barrel that the artillery system that we are providing are working extensively well, and there are some systems that are preferred by the Ukrainians. We know because they also ordered more. But
What are those that they prefer the most?
so I heard about the crabs. I heard about the crabs. They didn't like much the paladin, but I mean they are going to use whatever we send. They loved the S90, which is essentially a crab, by the way. I know that
Really?
there are, yeah. I mean yesterday I realized these, and then I had a very fun discussion with Andrew because as many times he, if you Google, you can say
He puts AS90 crab, doesn't he? And I keep saying to my viewers, I don't know if that's a typo because it's not the crab. But
no, no,
is
no. They
that
are
what
the
he's saying?
same system. They are
Right.
exactly the same. I just discovered because I was kind of working on some stuff, and then I came out with a true picture, and then I said, "Jesus, these are the same stuff."
But this is the AHS Crab is a South Korean Polish co-production, basically licensed from South Korea, really. But have they just taken the AS90, which is an old UK self-propelled howitzer from the 1990s? Are they just taken that and run with it?
They are they. If you scroll down,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think there is a note about that here.
AHS
Yes,
Crab, yeah.
yeah,
Licensed Braveheart turret on a South Korean K9 Thunder chassis. Oh, interesting. So the turret is basically the AS90. Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. So
yeah.
is that to say they prefer the AS90 because of what then? The chassis is better than the K9 Thunder?
On this, I don't have an idea. I
Right,
just had
okay.
these a couple of friends told me that there is a lot of love for the S90 and the crabs,
Oh,
and
and
but
the
also
crabs. Sorry,
Andrew.
I thought you said they didn't like the crabs. Okay,
No, no, no,
so
no,
they
no, no.
do, oh they
And
like the
my point
crabs.
was, yeah,
Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool beans. Yeah. So they like those two. Interesting. What don't they like so much of paladins, which are they're the American
yeah,
ones?
and also Andrew confirmed that they don't. But I honestly don't know the reason. Probably Andrew does.
Yeah.
Probably Andrew knows exactly why. Honestly, I was shocked about that. But a lot there is a lot of rumors about poor drivability. They tend to flip over. I mean, they are a good gun in overall, but
Yeah.
I mean they
You.
are using it in a proper environment. It's not just a
Yeah.
test environment, so they
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
So the
yeah.
conclusion, sorry, that we're giving them good kit and they're appreciating them.
Yes, but they of course need more. I mean, this is obvious, and they need more ammo because if.
Yeah.
But the main point, I mean, this specific thread was more very technical. I wasn't talking about Ukraine by itself. I was trying to make a point about the barrel system. The barrel that we produce are very good system. They are very good piece of technology. In some of our system, for example, the PH 2000, there is even sensor in the barrel that allows the operator to analyze data from the barrel and understand if the barrel has a major issue. So we are not talking about boutique equipment, stuff that is needed to inflate the budget of someone, because I hate these, because this is completely false. These are very, very capable kit. Of course, some are better than others. Each has its own niche. In particular, the PH2000 was designed not to fire thousand and thousand of rounds in a day or in a very restricted amount of time, but more for precise strikes and using guided ammunition and to fire very much with high precision. Because remember, most of the kit that we are sending, apart some, came from a doctrine that was close to the end of the Cold War. And we knew at the time that we were outnumbered. So the reason why we pushed so much in electronics and in precision was because we were like 3-1 in Germany, and we couldn't have chance if we would not be more precise and more lethal. So
right, that's really interesting. That makes so much sense now, because I was always talking about this in terms of missiles and saying, well, we're much more concerned with not causing collateral damage, being more efficient, but just in a general sense of being more efficient, you know, from a cost point of view. But actually, from that very particular military asymmetry point of view, where you're fighting against a Soviet army that doesn't care about the loss of equipment or personnel, actually, you need to be able to attrit them at a rate that that overcomes their mass advantage. So that's why precision is so important. I freaking get that now. That is so obvious, but yeah. So it's not so much a general thing about whatever. This is who are we going to be fighting against, and how are they going to do what is their doctrine? So we will be fighting against the Soviets or the Russians, and this is their doctrine. So therefore, this is the way we are going. Sorry.
No, exactly. And I totally support this also, because many people continue to say, oh, it doesn't matter about the quality of stuff, just send whatever. Whatever is not good, because there are life of people, of human being, of friends, and on the line. And if you look at the bare number and also the attitude, Ukrainians has human life as a thing. So they care about their soldier. They don't want to lose, even in a cynical point of view. Okay, remove my bias. They have a limited number of bodies, and they are less than the opponent. They can't lose them for collateral damage.
Russians have 100 million more people, so you know.
So you can't do that. And just to return to Cold War, there is a documentary about exercise of NATO on the border, and one of the theory was, if the Russian would breach the gap next to Frankfurt, I think, was like a slip of terrain, flat, where essentially NATO were expecting an enormous amount of tank to come in. The solution, if our strategy of precision striking would not be effective, was to nuke. So just to let you understand that we never been in the position of conducting a war where we could match the opponent. We are always been outnumbered by our enemy, and this led our struggle in making our weaponry more efficient, more accurate. Of course, war like in the Balkans and others in Iraq made us more cautious, also because politicians start to say, okay, but I want to bomb a bad guy, but then I destroy a school. It's not good, because in democracy, these things make you lose the vote. Always cynical. Of course, the school and the hospital is important. But this is why also you can see a storm shadow destroying a building inside the city center and not doing nearly damage to the surrounding, because we invested on that, and those money are worth it, because we didn't kill civilian directly. I don't think there were any civilian involved, by the way.
That's money well spent, because actually, you know, it is wars are fought in the political and public domains as well, and you know, PR is important, and that needs to be taken into account when you are devising a weapon. Interestingly, from a Russian point of view, when they live in a dictatorship, they don't need to. So I always use the example of FAB 500s or whatever. They don't have this system whereby, so for example, with the with the Storm Shadow missile, if something goes wrong, it has a designated safe space, as far as I understand it. And then if it can't hit the target or can't get a lock on the target it's supposed to, then it will fly itself off to this safe space and go and blow up. So, in a field somewhere where the the operators have designated that it should go. Whereas with the Russian munitions, they don't appear to give a damn about that, because actually they're not worried about any PR backlash. So it's just like, well, if it doesn't hit the right place, it'll just hit a building where people live, and we don't really care about blowing them up. So, whatever.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this is technology that we developed, I think 15, 20 years ago, something like that, because it's not new, by the way. It's not stuff that is very new. There are other systems, and one of the problem that I honestly see on Storm Shadow is the fact that at the moment, and John probably spoke about this, or you can ask him more details, but from what he told me, there are no production of new Storm Shadow, which is, in my opinion, a mistake, because UK, for example, has its own program that should replace Storm Shadow, but if it will ever enter into production, it will be 2026. What we do in the meantime, I don't know.
I don't understand. Yeah, and the only answer that seems conceivable that people give is that when you have decommissioned or I don't know, when you've stopped producing a munition, then you kind of replace those machines with the machines for the new thing you're going to produce, and then you're going to retrain the people on how to produce a new thing, and then suddenly a war comes along and said, oh, we need another 800 Storm Shadows. You're like, well, actually, we don't have those machines anymore. We don't have the expertise to build those munitions, is the only conceivable argument I can think of.
For example, Stinger had a very similar issue, and I don't know this as first hand, but I was told by the guys in the Tochnyi, I think Erland and also John told me that essentially the main issue with I think also Andrew knows a bit about that. Essentially, Stinger was out of production. There was none, so they had to restart production. And this took time, to the point that they showed the manpad from Poland now is one of the most loved weapon in and really used manpads in alongside the Starstreak in Ukraine. Now I don't remember the name, but it's very
Is that
much
the
used.
Piron?
Yes, that's one. We were discussing this a couple of weeks ago, and this is straight away because the production is online. Stinger is going to take time, and also one of the issue with Stinger is that, from what I was told, is assembled by hand. So essentially, there is a lot of labor-intense work, which limit your production.
And the Puron, that's 2019, so that's also Stinger's been around for bloody ages, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
also upgraded.
yeah, of course, no doubt. But the fact that it's not built anymore would suggest that Puron is, I mean, it's a good replacement, I would have thought. But so they have now revamped the production lines for the Stingers then.
Yes. I mean, Stinger essentially was one of the first things that was announced to be put in place, because it took a lot of time to bring back. But for Storm Shadow, without going too much into the details, the production line exists, is there, but the problem is political, because someone have to go to the producer, to MDA and BAE, and say, okay, we order 1,000 Storm Shadow, resume the production, please, because those factories are essentially off now.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them that at some point they will repurpose them if they need. And I don't see why Europe, because we saw the effectiveness of these weapons, we say, okay, maybe it's good to place, I don't know, another 500 each nation, so UK, France, and Italy, and maybe at this point also Germany, because really we have to be grateful that we built like 1,000 many years ago, because we used in the Libyan war, we used now in Ukraine, we are using against the Yemenis rebels, but at some point they will finish. And then what we have as alternative? Nothing. So I don't know if we have to do a petition to Sunak or something,
Well,
because
so I was just trying to find. So Sunak today has promised long-distance missiles as well. Here we have it, long-range missiles. So I don't know whether that's going to be something like maritime missiles or something that we might have a greater stock of, or is that more Storm Shadows, which would be fantastic. But as you say, we're not building them. So you're absolutely right. And if you're going to have to restart a factory to rebuild them and get the capital back in place, then you're going to need a big order, which would mean, you know, as you say, France, Italy, and maybe Germany to replace some Tauruses that might be given or something. It's interesting with these Pirons that from Poland that the US ordered a bunch in 2022. Now, one presumes that's not for for the US, but they've ordered them, and at the same time, a bunch were delivered to Ukraine. So one presumes that they were ordered by the US and sent to Ukraine. So yeah,
or they ordered because they sent whatever Stinger they had. Maybe
yeah,
that's
yeah,
another.
and they do have them for themselves. Who knows? Who knows?
And I was told it's a good system. The Pure.
Yes, yeah, I imagine it is. You know, the Polish are doing a pretty decent job of working with other manufacturers, like in South Korea, but also they are spending just inordinate amounts of money on their own armed forces. So it's just, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that they've got some pretty half decent kit coming out themselves. Look, I guess that brings us to the end of this chat. Really appreciate what you have talked about. And I would advise that all the viewers go and check out Tochnyi on, well, obviously on Twitter, and you can find you on Twitter at Deniele, as you can see from here, which is HeartTreeFock, as well as on that's Covert Cabal, always useful to follow on YouTube, but also follow Tochnyi on YouTube, which can be found at TOCHNYI. So please do that, viewers, and that would be fantastic. Any final words, Daniela?
Oh well, I'm not very good with final word, but what I can say is Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, always the best option. Like, if in doubt, a bit of Slava Ukraini never goes wrong. Never goes wrong. Well, look, stay on the line, mate. But cheers, buddy. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll do these kind of things again. And of course, all the time that anyone from Tochnyi spends chatting to me on my channel, you can mirror it and put it on Tochnyi as well. That's not a problem at all. In the meantime, I won't be doing any other sections on top of this video, because this one has actually gone on longer than we thought, but it's been really interesting. I hope you guys got a lot out of it as well. Please like, subscribe, and share. Do all those things. Hit bells. Stand on your left leg on a Tuesday. Whatever it is that floats your boat, as long as you can float my boat, which is subscribe, like, and share, and all that stuff. Take care. Speak soon, and all the best.
Bye bye.